All right, everybody. We are back once again with studying the effects of caffeine on marine mammals. I mean, artificially independently intelligent, our show where Andy and I get together and just talk about AI and society and life, whatever else we feel like talking about. If you guys have joined us before, you know the conversation will go in all kinds of directions. But today, Andy, you actually reached out to me with something that was on your mind about AI, and you wanted to sort of kind of set the stage for what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, so I think we're in this very uh, we're still very high in the peak of the hype cycle around AI, and we're seeing a lot of the messaging of, well, AI can do all these different jobs. And it's something we kind of touched on before. It is a concern, I think, that is uh, a little overblown, um, because I think we're also seeing, on one side, the efficiencies that people think they can get from it are overblown.
Right.
Um, so, I was doing a bit of reading earlier this week on a case study around Klarna, the financial services kind of micro loan, microfinancing type service that like made this massive bet on AI. They were like, we're all in. They replaced their entire customer service organization, and claimed that they were going to get massive cost savings, and it was going to be great. And I think their CEO even did one of their analyst calls, as an AI generated version of himself. I mean, they were like all in.
Right.
And so it turns out, fast forward a little bit, they actually pulled back on that a bit, and because they realized that, especially in an environment where you're dealing with financial transactions, that humans are still essential in the loop of customer service. It just a fully automated solution does not sit well with customers, and actually eroded customer trust uh, in the product, to the point where they finally said, yeah, we need humans in the loop. So I think it's, we get we get caught up in this whole, well, AI can replace this many workers, and I'm really starting to think that we need to talk less about replacing, and focusing on laying people off, and instead focus on where can we redeploy those people to extract the most value that you're going to get above and beyond what AI can give you.
Uh, it's a good point, man. Do you feel like now, as we read the news all the time, the big
Yeah.
companies laying people off, saying, "Hey, our workforce is going to be replaced," and I won't name any names, but like, there's been a couple in the news this week.
Yep.
It's an interesting problem. Like, I think larger companies, maybe while they're buying into AI, which I agree with, are also too quick to jump to the conclusion of what AI might eventually be, which might be replacing humans, right? Like, there might be a real world here of an eventuality where you don't need humans in the loop. But I don't think we're there. And
No.
I think the concept that they're going to replace jobs, to me at least, is secondary to the concept that they could make us more efficient at our jobs right now.
Yes.
To me, that's the outcome that I see as the most likely short-term outcome. Everything's so compressed, though. I mean, maybe that short-term outcome is 6 months, and then
Yeah.
we're back in this whole cycle. But everything that I've done, like, I spent the weekend trying to build out a MCP server based on some stuff that we had done inside of AWS called the AWS Labs, trying to take that and make it externally available. So I was like, oh, well, we have this project called Agent Core. I can just take it, I can deploy this into Agent Core, and it's just going to work. I struggled a little bit. It was a little harder than I thought. So I was like, oh, let me break out, AI. I'm just going to go to Claude and I'm going to start asking Claude Code some questions. Um, and I was like, oh, well, cool. I'll just let it run with this. And about an hour in, it had produced so much garbage. And I was like, okay, like, well, I'm just using AI wrong. Like, clearly this was too big of an ask for AI.
Yeah.
took a step all the way back and said, okay, well, I had already started working on this. Like, what's the problem with this file? Like, what's the thing? What should I do here? How would I solve this problem? And then AI was very helpful, right? Using the same set of tools, it was able to help guide me and help me do some new code faster than I would have been able to do it myself. To me, that outcome seems like a given today. I feel like people are really jumping the gun though, and like you said, like the example you started with, just saying, "Oh, I expect to be able to use AI and just trust the outcomes and have other humans trust this outcomes," still seems really problematic to me.
Yeah, and I think it's that there's that assumption that it can do everything, because we haven't seen a lot of solutions that are completely tailored to niche use cases that enterprises have.
Right.
You see more of these like general type offerings, like the Chat GPTs, the Claudes of the world, and they've set up and taught people to expect to pay a flat rate per month. And that does not fly in the enterprise world. So you're going to have one or two things happen. You're either going to have these solutions that people claim are going to be less costly and more efficient, um, actually be more expensive than they think they will be, because they're comparing it to a consumer solution. Yeah. Or they'll end up with the cost of these tools that don't get used because people are using, kind of like this shadow AI economy on the side, using these consumer tools themselves. So I think there's a couple of factors at play that are going to really, affect adoption here, and we're going to see, probably an increase, I would think, in the next 6 to 9 months in some of these enterprise AI tools, especially as they figure out how to price them properly.
And that's a big point too, right? I think there's an interesting economy effect to this. Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned when we were talking is the sociology of this, right? Yeah. All of our behavior toward AI and toward each other and everything else is based on our own sociological context. Mm-hmm. So if AI was free, and you could just play with it all day, all of the outcomes would seem valuable because you had no cost associated with it. It's just like, oh, maybe I learned something, maybe I didn't. If I didn't, I didn't really lose much. So I spent that hour letting Claude go down this road that led nowhere. And by the time I realized, I was like, oh, that's a lot of cycles. Yeah. If you associate a high cost with those cycles, you'd be really frustrated. Mm-hmm. If you just said, hey, this is free, then the trust side of this doesn't matter that much. The trust that I've established with it is like, okay, well, it did do some cool stuff, and I could see it did some cool stuff. So now I'm going to go back and try to focus on those things. But I would take the time to experiment with it if it's free. If you say, hey, I'm going to take somebody who's never used this stuff before, put this in front of them, and the first thing they do is get something that's unhelpful, untrue, or in some way, incapable of earning trust, maybe you don't earn that person's trust ever, right? Or at least not for a significant amount of time. And like you said, with these tools that are entirely dedicated to a specific use case, until they reach a certain gravity of their capabilities, then the people who use them are going to lose trust really quickly. And I think that's probably, thinking about what we've been seeing in the news, that's part of the concern of this for me.
Yeah. Well, and nothing's going to replace that human connection. Right. We are inherently social animals, and we tend to gravitate towards other people in general. And we want to be a part of a community, part of a connection. And the more that we break that up and rely on these machines that don't have any sense of empathy or way to connect with people on that level, then the more I think that we're going to see that trust erode, because there is a fundamental human need for connection that it's not going to see.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point of where we are right now in this journey. And I don't know, dude. I think as I think about like the progression of this, what do you think is sort of pushing the problem there? Like I've been thinking a lot about, and I don't want to point fingers because there's been a little bit of finger pointing in this article, but I was reading some articles and some posts back and forth on LinkedIn this week, and a lot of them were sort of, pointing to like, well, who's to blame? Like, why is this hype cycle happening? Why does it seem overhyped? And some people were sort of pointing their fingers at VCs and saying like, yeah, so there was actually James Goslin, and he's famous, so I'll call him out, or he's a public figure. Hopefully, don't sue us, James. It's just us here. He was basically saying, hey, I read an article in The Economist, and I kind of agree here. Like, this is, AI is real. It's going to become normal. But his exact wording was, the road there is going to be bloody. And I think there's some real truth to that. He kind of switches over and says, VCs don't care about long-term viability of customers. A lot of these customers are going to get booted. Um, and you got booted. As I was saying, a lot of these companies are going to get booted. You got booted off the
Yeah. You said it was going to get bloody.
And it's going to get bloody, and off you go. I think there's a lot to this. And I kind of also think, going to your the impact of this, pushing the hype cycle, getting more of these solutions out there without any care about the companies themselves or the people using them, is probably one of the things that's going to make this harder, right? At least in my opinion. Like this is, and we can kind of get into whether this is a bubble and whether this hype cycle has an end or whatever. But in the short term, we're seeing these solutions being launched. And like one example I heard the other day, someone was talking about some marketing software that she was using. Liked it the first time. It was giving her a lot of help. Had to walk away. So she lost her session, right? So she lost the context, came back, and the software was arguing with the inputs it had already made. Like last time it ran, it produced all of these great outputs. She's like, well, these seem helpful. And then the next time she turned it on, it's like, who did this? What kind of idiot did all of this work here? This is all wrong. And it's arguing with its own output. So like there's gonna be some lost trust. And I think, like every other hype cycle, pushing the hype cycle causes bad outcomes in some ways. So like, I don't know, do you agree, or do you kind of see like the hype cycle in a different lens than these people are talking about?
So I see it. I look at it from kind of two different perspectives. When you look at it from like an industry perspective, and that piece of software that you're just talking about, the marketing software, it makes sense.
Yeah.
The hype, I think, is for the LLMs in general, is not answering the fundamental question of what are we trying to solve with this.
I think that's fair.
Are we trying to solve, a fundamental intellectual laziness with people, that we don't want to think things all the way through? I mean, it is, I'm struggling to find, and for these generalized tools, like, the Claudes and the GPTs of the world, what are we trying to solve? What are we solving? If it's something like, for a customer service tool, or, creating marketing assets or something like that, I get that. That's what we're trying to solve. But what are we trying to solve by having these just general LLMs out there in the world that people can use for whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I think all of us have gotten some value out of LLMs, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, anybody can go on, you could use Perplexity. Like going on Perplexity, I go on there, I do a search, I get better results, right? Like plain and simple. Than my traditional search engines, I'm getting a better focused return on the historical information that's out there. Like that's the table stakes now. Like that's been done. Like, from the moment OpenAI kind of opened everybody's eyes, not to create a pun, but from the moment our eyes were all opened by seeing the tool that was out there, all of a sudden the race was on. It's like, hey, you can take all the information out there, chew it up, and spit it back out in a conversation. But like what you're saying, like that next point, it's like, that's cute. It's useful, at least in some contexts. And there have been some companies that have managed to basically be LLM wrappers.
Yeah.
and be successful. But I think that's been done. Like that era is past us. So your question about what are we trying to do here? Like what's the output of these things is the relevant question now. And I mean, I've had some very interesting conversations with people. That CEO from Rocks who came on and joined us on SaaS Mondays, uh, he had a really good point of view on this, which was we're trying to create operating systems for different roles. Like we're trying to get really myopic in our focus and say, if you're trying to do this very specific job, we can make this information that's returned from the LLM, from RAG, from whatever other things we're adding to it, very focused on your expertise. And in doing so, we can just remove some of the undifferentiated heavy lifting from your job, which is cool. Like, I love that idea. And I'm sure we talked about this last time because it's been so much on my mind. Like, I feel like the goal for me personally, like, as I think about, like, if I was starting up a company right now, this idea of the one person unicorn really
Mhm.
resonates with me. And it's not that I don't want other humans in the loop, but I want to be the human in the loop that can kick off most of these work streams initially. Be like, I'm not a CFO. I've never been a CFO, but I want to not have a CFO in my company at first. I want to be able to use this operating system for CFOs and just be like, listen, these are my goals. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. How do I do it? And then get that kind of advice. Same thing with CTO, same thing with CMO, same thing with CSO, all of these different things. And then at some point, I want to just be able to say, okay, well, that got me here. Now I need a human. Now I need someone to even if they need to go talk to the LM, they need to go do this because I can't
Yeah.
do all of these jobs. But I'd love to be able to launch a company and take it pretty far. So like that idea, like that we're building operating systems for jobs, really resonates with me. Or maybe more specifically, roles. Who are the roles who are using these operating systems, and how does it make their lives better, or even, God, make me not need that role for a certain amount of time because the rudimentary stuff that they would do is just done for me.
And so, how do you account for the talent gap that you're creating?
That's a real problem. I actually had a really good conversation with a founder up in San Fran a couple weeks ago when I was up there. So we were at an event talking about how you can quickly build applications. So we were there with Vercel and NeonDB. They were all talking, and I was up there talking about the SaaS side of things. Um, it was very interesting because it pulled together a very interesting set of founders into the room. And I had a conversation with one who's building some software around training. And I was like, oh, training, I've heard it. Like, okay, everybody's done training. There's nothing new here. But his focus was very different. What he was focused on was creating scenarios to train junior people so that companies could actually still hire junior people. And he's focused on programming as his first use case because it's sort of the obvious training paradigm,
Yeah.
right? So that these people who are junior can learn from real world scenarios and actually do these things when we actually don't need them to, because again, because you can just go to any of these coding tools and it could probably do a better job than a junior engineer at this point. But you still need the senior engineers to, again, be the human in the loop on these things. So I think what he was seeing, and I think is going to be a fascinating aspect of this, is we might end out with junior people just not doing real work. Like maybe they
Yeah.
just like take lots of training and they just kind of go along for a ride, working with ULM, watching what it's doing for a couple of years until they get to be experts at talking to the LLM and understanding the underlying needs of what it needs to do. Because I think that's the job of the near future,
Hmm.
is no longer the programmer. It's the person who can remediate any mistakes or guide the coding tools or the LLMs, however they're being used, in the right direction. I feel like that's the new job. But I think you need to train those people up. So I think this idea that companies might become like a core group of people who actually does stuff, and then a bit of an incubator to teach people who don't know how to do that stuff, to bring them on board and get them up to speed so they can become part of that core. It might go back to that old model of like apprenticeship,
Yeah.
You don't get to weld the pipe for the first couple of years. You get to watch the guy welding the pipe because you're gonna mess it up. Then you get to practice on some fake pipes, and then eventually we'll let you weld a pipe, right? But we don't let the junior guy do that on his first
No.
jobs.
Well, and maybe, we kind of this, my brain just went to kind of these, this thought of, AI is going to replace my job. Maybe it is those jobs that are traditionally not meritocracy. They're more put your time in and wait your turn.
Yeah.
Lawyers, accountants, etc. Um, that are not differentiated with creativity. You don't want, you don't necessarily want the most creative accountant. You want an accountant that's going to follow the rules.
I guess it depends what outcomes you want to derive.
This is true. This is true. But it's, in those highly regulated jobs,
Yeah.
highly regulated tasks that have a lot of guardrails on them and have to be done a specific way, those are ripe.
Yeah.
For automation.
Right, for automation, and at the same time, still fall into this category you're talking about. Like, I still want a very senior person, at the accounting firm, like watching and making sure there wasn't a hallucination on somebody's tax returns, and that we find out when it costs us $100,000.
Yeah.
Like, I want a human looking at these things in the same problem space, right? Like, okay, well, now I need junior accountants just sitting around, basically like watching the LLMs and learning. Like, okay, what do they do? What mistakes did they make?
Or
You
orchestrators.
know, well, yeah, like more orchestrators, right? Like, I'm just watching these things. I don't do anything. Like, if a problem does come up, I call the senior guy and be like, hey, like, let's walk through the scenario, and maybe that's just the world we're heading toward. Or maybe we're just entirely wrong. Maybe
Yeah.
all of this stuff is going to outpace the perception that we have that we're going to need these junior people, and by the time those junior people became senior people, you don't even need the senior people anymore. The LLMs have progressed fast enough. I think I'm very worried about that path, though. That is something that concerns me a lot. Is this idea that knowledge and wherewithal to do these actual tasks is just sort of abdicated to AI, and said,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, we don't need an experienced programmer. I don't need Uncle Bob anymore to be able to tell me how to do microservices and evolve the thinking. I'm not sure when AI gets creative. I think that's a real question for me. Like, I don't trust it to be creative.
Yeah.
Yet.
That's the border. That's the limit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Micro, the guy that does dirty jobs.
Yeah.
For as long as I can remember, he has been advocating for more education around trades. So plumbers, carpenters,
Yeah.
electricians. And, those are jobs that are not going to be, overtaken by this. And it is one of those, we've seen this kind of boom of a service economy that is, very, all these white collar, type workers, that have these non manual jobs.
Yeah.
That, you know, in hindsight, we're all set up to be kind of, disposable in a way, or not disposable, replaceable. But the pipe fitter is not going to be taken over by AI. I mean, it's that may become more valuable than ever. And so you could also argue, well, what's the value of a college education anymore?
I mean, I'm sure people have been arguing that for a little while anyway, as it gets more expensive and the outputs of it become more of a question. If in fact, like, let's kind of go down that road, because I think that there's an interesting aspect to this of, like, so we've talked about, do you need junior people in jobs? If you don't need junior people in the jobs, what are you training them for? If it's just memorization of large amounts of information, that's kind of like the first thing LLMs are good at.
Yeah.
Like, admittedly, like, there are jobs that are tied to physical skills that, at least for now, robotics aren't going to be able to really take over, like a doctor.
Yeah.
Doctors are going to still have to be able to memorize lots of stuff. I expect LLMs to complement their memories and make them more productive. At the same time, I want that surgeon to have hands for now.
Yeah.
Like I want like someone who actually knows how to make like a perfectly still cut in my abdomen when they need to.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a piece of that, but what you mentioned lawyers. They're literally just memorizing lots and lots of facts, finding creative ways to reuse those facts. The memorization of facts, like if that's what you're doing in college for a lawyer, if you're just going and learning and saying, well, I saw this case before, and therefore, like this is how you think about this type of case law. I don't know that there's as much value to that going forward.
Yeah.
Now, again, the creativity side, because the law is actually very creative. Like you're looking at all these different laws and saying, we could interpret it this way, and that helps my case, while the other person says we could interpret it this way, and then a judge is trying to qualify which one of those is a better argument.
Well, it's
That's
also about
going
how you deliver the argument. It's
also very true.
the Johnny Cochrans of the world.
LLMs can talk pretty good now, though. Like they could do a pretty good voice. So if you could get a Johnny Cochran LLM, if the glove does not fit, you cannot. Yeah.
Have you seen the new Naked Gun?
I have not.
So there's a part at the beginning where, so it's like the characters are all like the kids of the guys from the first one.
Oh, nice.
And you have, the new Frank Drebin looking up at Leslie Nielsen going, Dad, tell me what to do. And then you have, the guy that's, the chief's son, tell me what to do. Then you get to the guy that was the OJ character son. He just looks up, he goes, nope.
That's great, man.
Just nope.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting path we're going down here.
Yeah.
Like you keep winding it back. Like at some point, I mean, do you need education at all? Like, I mean, right? Like, what are you learning exactly? Or is what we call education now the right things to be training our brain on?
Well, I mean, okay, so let's pull that thread a bit, because I've got 2 kids in college now, and what I would want them to come out of that with is learning how to be productive members of society, human interaction, learning to think for themselves and think creatively, not just taking things at face value, asking why. Those are the things that I think we should be valuing out of an education, rather than just a piece of paper saying you went to these classes and whatnot. Because you've got anybody can go to any number of these schools and get a degree and whatnot. And in our parents' generation, that mattered.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't have an MBA, you weren't gonna get a decent you only had so far you could go in an organization. That does not apply. I mean, it's so what does that mean for our kids? I don't know.
Yeah. I think thinking about kids is an interesting lens to look at this through. I've got 2 girls as well. Neither of them's in college yet, and the stuff that they're learning now, it seems fundamental, right? Like I'd like them to be able to do math without cracking a computer. I'd like them to be able to understand how computers think and work. Like I wish that they were, I'd like them to be technical enough to be able to, empathy is the wrong word, but sort of empathize with computers, to sort of understand, like have a instinctive understanding of why they do what they do, which I think is a differentiator for people in general in tech, outside of tech. So not to sidetrack into that, but I think there's an interesting conversation about people who get computers and people who get how technology works.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a skill that we should be teaching and maybe aren't doing enough of yet. But I think what they come out of school with, is it just being creative and how they work together with other people, and is that a more lasting skill than driving them towards STEM and saying like, oh, you should study science and math, and are those going to be the things that are subsumed by AI?
Three years ago, I would have fully said yes.
Right.
But we are in a much different world than we were,
Yeah.
3 years ago. Much different world than we were 30 seconds ago. I mean, it is. I guess yes. I mean, the question becomes, what is the value of a college education?
Yeah. And I do struggle with this. Like, obviously, I think most of us, or a lot of people out there, I won't say most to be presumptuous, but I think a lot of us still feel like higher education is valuable. And despite, like, there's been this whole craze about, like, college debt and everything else being too much. And like, yes, like, I'm also empathize with this, but I still think it's valuable. I still think people should be getting a higher education and trying to better their minds. But a lot of people are already saying like they're not getting enough value out of what they paid for, in terms of the rewards that society gives them for doing it. I feel like that trend's got to only be heading one way.
I wonder what percentage of people of our generation that graduated from college are even doing anything in the field they studied.
Well, I'm not.
I
I mean,
mean,
I think a lot of it was learning to think, though,
yeah,
right? So, one of the best solutions architects, we didn't call them solutions architects back then, but like the best solutions architects I ever worked with had a philosophy degree, which really helped him to like dig into problems and ask the next question. Like, he was awesome at just asking the why questions that got you back to, what were you trying to do? How did you arrive at what you were doing? And were you even thinking about the right things and focused on the right things when you did them? Or do you need to go all the way back to the beginning and reset your thought process? As good as anybody has ever seen at thinking about that things in that way. I think in some ways, non-technical degrees help you more in this current world. And in fact, like a cool quote I heard the other day, and again, I don't know where to attribute this to, I just read it in passing somewhere on LinkedIn, was somebody saying, I think it's going to be the technical jobs that are hit worse. And not because it's easier to do the tech jobs, but the human side of this. It's easier for me to take a project manager and teach them to use the technology to build something than to take a builder and teach them to do the project management side of how to be structured and build. Now, I have questions about this too. When you look at tools like Kiro that help you to actually think and plan, then maybe that turns on its head again. But I kind of agree. Like, I feel like it's the soft skills, it's the ability to think and abstract out the underlying problems and let the tool fix the actual problems. That's maybe the better skill right now.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's like my youngest is a freshman this year, and she hasn't had to share a room with anybody since she was 3.
yeah,
And she's learning how to she has to share laundry facilities with everybody else on the floor, and she has to deal with her roommate, and it's all this stuff of how you interact and how you deal with people that it's the almost like the unsaid education of higher education.
yeah, yes, I think there is something to be said for being stuck in an environment with hundreds or thousands of other people you don't know,
Yeah.
and having to develop a society with them, in the context of learning, right? A lot of the learning at college has nothing to do with learning.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an interesting way to put that. Like, it's a little inaccurate because you're still learning, but just the concepts, like, eating with people, going to the dining room, who you sit with, learning to talk to people who aren't like you, or have different backgrounds than you, or think differently than you do. Like, how do you learn to talk to people you disagree with? And
Yeah.
honestly, like, this is a skill that I think our society could use a little bit more of right now.
Yeah.
I think we're all kind of getting down these roads, myself, and I won't exclude myself from this, of like, everyone retreating to their corners and not talking to people who really fundamentally disagree with you ever. And
We
I
love
don't
our
know
echo
that,
chambers.
yeah, more echo chambers, more selective thinking, being reinforced continually. And then again, lack of ability to really discern underlying truths from facts.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I heard somebody say we're in a post-truth era.
Oh God,
It's like,
that's
what
depressing.
that's like, okay. Does that mean just everything's bullshit then?
It kind of sometimes it feels like it, right?
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing. Like one of our original premises, bringing it back to at least somewhere into the realm of our original premises, is trust.
Yeah.
In this world where we don't trust other people to say and do things that are true, or just not things that agree with their own sort of disposed beliefs, or how do we trust AI to keep some version of the center of truth when humans are like diametrically opposed in their versions of truth, and yet we're training AI on the bank of all human knowledge, and it's going to read, this is the truth, and this is the truth, and these things are diametrically opposed and irreconcilable. How does AI navigate this world and remain trustworthy when 50% of people are going to distrust it if it says this, and 50% of people are going to trust it if it says this?
Oh,
Like, that's a
well, we're
complex
already
problem.
seeing the seeds of that being sown when, you see something that is, factual, and verifiable, come out, and then somebody says, "Oh, that's fake.
Yeah.
That's not real. That's a hoax." And so there's already, that, distrust. And I was, watching, sitting next to my wife, and she's scrolling on Instagram, and she, brings this video, like, "God, can you believe so and so said this?" And I don't even have to look at it. I can just close my eyes and listen to it. It's like, that's fake. That's, it's, I mean, it is, remember that old saying, was it, believe 25% of what you hear and 50% of what you read? I never thought that would be obsolete, but I think those numbers need to be severely revised downward. I mean, and it's one of those, people are believing the version of facts or the truth that they want to believe. And if that's the material that AI is ingesting for its training,
Yeah.
then it is, inherently, we're just prolonging the problem. So how do you fact check what's going into the models?
Yeah, I almost wonder. I'm probably most of our listeners have some background in AI, or they probably wouldn't be here in the first place. But I almost wonder if you need like a RAG model for like what version of the truth you like. We do it for
Yeah.
tenancy, like, oh, if you're a tenant who sells golf equipment, here's one like your version of truth for a catalog. If you sell, machinery for construction, it's a completely different version of truth for what you consider a product catalog, even though it's the same construct. It'd be like, oh, if you're not to use social constructs like conservative versus liberal, but like they're kind of accurate
Yeah.
in this sense. Here's your conservative library of facts, and here's your liberal library of facts. And if you want to use an LLM, you have to feed it in with your beliefs and your underlying structure. Like, hey, I am I'm a this type of person from this type of place who believes in this type of things. I don't want to see truths that disagree with my core beliefs that align with these things. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, just think of the two most different people you can imagine in the world and put them in front of an LLM. They're not going to like, one of them is not going to like the LLM if it's returning the other person's truths. Like, do we
Well,
need that? Is that going to be what happens?
and this is going to sound, I can't say this without sounding like some intellectual, egotistical person, but there are people that cannot tell the difference, that
Yeah.
don't have the capacity to differentiate and just choose to believe what's in front of them. They don't choose to ask why.
Right.
And so, those are the folks that that are perpetuating the slops coming out.
That takes us down a whole dark road, doesn't it? Like, I
That's
mean,
what
the
we do,
people
right?
who, well, and there's an even darker version of that, which there are people who do know the truth and are willfully spreading disinformation to those people who cannot discern the difference to further their own specific agendas.
Yeah.
And that's one of the harder things. And I won't attribute that to any specific group or people, but I think we all recognize that there's people who have agendas and are specifically injecting information to support those agendas and their outcomes that they're trying to drive. And those could be extremely diverse. Like this, like take a whole different scenario. Imagine, like, getting away from like the sort of social norms of conservative versus liberal. You just want to further your own ends. So you're like, okay, I believe in a specific type of coin, of crypto coin, for example, and I'm just going to spread a bunch of information so that like a pump and dump, right? Like this sort of
Hmm.
traditional pump and dump, right? I'm
Yep.
just going to spread a bunch of information. It's going to get picked up, and I'm sort of imagining a world with real time knowledge here, not just a traditional LLM. I'm influential enough that this becomes truth in front of enough people that I can make machine learning uh, actually create the outcome I was trying to drive, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, these news watchers see I'm an influencer, they pick this up, it gets in front of a bunch of people's eyeballs, which kind of happens today anyway. Like
Yeah.
this is kind of what happens on Twitter, but taken to the nth degree where there isn't even a human in the loop and AI is just driving all of this behavior. I could create a world where I can become, wealthy or influential or get whatever I want simply by perpetuating, incorrect things or false things at the right velocity and messaging to get in front of these people. That's kind of a bummer, dude. Like
So,
it feels like we're already there, but we're going further.
so how many of the people that you think peddle this horse shit actually believe it, or are
Oh,
just hucksters and you know in it for the buck?
I'm gonna put this on screen because this is an old friend of mine who I worked with a long time ago. David, hey, how you doing, man? I 100% right.
Yeah.
We're gonna wax philosophical here sooner or later talking about this topic. Um, it's yeah, it's a challenging problem space that, like, the further you go down this rabbit hole, the more damning it seems. While our original premise, of course, was like about trust of AI and like us trying to like develop, like overcome the cultural resistance to it and adapt it and understanding the value that it adds, are also eroded by what we either perceive as or what will eventually be its ability to perpetuate falsehoods, right? To actually
Yeah.
inject these things. Like what happens when a hate group or somebody else creates their own version of LLMs to sort of perpetuate their own beliefs and spreads those. It's like spreading a book, right?
Yeah.
Like back in the day, anarchist cookbook or some other thing would only have so many copies and it would get handed around.
Yeah.
Like this is like the anarchist's LLM
Yeah.
getting handed around across the internet. Like, okay, you can learn all about all of our beliefs just by like digging into these things that we consider to be true. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you almost end up with like an LLM cult.
I
Um,
mean, that's like a cult leader is just somebody who has their own version of facts they can influence enough people about, right, and continue to keep them in thrall of. Like, why not an
mhm.
LLM that just convinces everybody, like, and keeps them all in thrall of they're like, wow, it knows so much about stuff. Like, okay,
When the LLM starts going, everybody should buy white Nikes and drink Kool-Aid.
yeah,
Then
exactly.
we need to be worried here.
Like, I like this. David, thanks for tuning in. Like, we don't have a ton of viewers here. This is mostly Andy and I just talking and hanging out. But yeah, like this is a lot of really good points, man. Like idea of a conceptual model for like actually addressing this issue. Like I think we need it. It's kind of surprising as I'm talking about this stuff. I know lots of people are thinking about governance.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard people like talking about the exact like wormhole that we've gone down here. Like maybe we've just gone too far down the wormhole and we're gone. But like the idea of having a system that actually said, "Hey, analyze how we're training the data. Who is the philosophy? Who's pushing the philosophies behind it?
Yeah.
And like what happens if like I mean." it's really easy to say like, oh, the people who control LLMs, like Anthropic and Google and everybody else are all well intended. We've all seen major organizations get hijacked as well,
Mhm.
right? So what happens if I'm not going to throw Anthropic under the bus, they're a great organization. What happens if some LLM producing organization gets hijacked by an agenda and says, oh, so they've already got this distribution network, and all of us are producing their LLMs and providing them through the context that people consume LLMs with. And all of a sudden, you've got this thing that's spitting out some form of disinformation or hate speech or something else purposely, right? Like intentionally.
Well, so don't we as humans just naturally have unconscious bias that gets injected into things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's already plenty of bias.
Yeah,
I mean, if nothing else, how America centric is most of the information in LLMs, because
yeah,
most of the LLMs are being produced here, and why some countries are actually trying to produce their own LLMs to make them more centric to their point of views, right?
yeah,
We're very biased inherently. We're biased in thinking we're not biased a lot of the time. Like, I don't
yeah.
have an accent, you have an accent,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. It's, I mean, yeah, it's so we're talking about how do we trust these models and everything. It's just I think maybe there's a fundamental, if we can't, will we ever be able to trust a model if we can't inherently, if we are eroding trust in people and communications in general?
Yeah. I think that's the core concern. Like maybe trying to project all of these concerns onto LLMs really just goes back to societal
Yeah,
concerns anyway. And maybe taking an optimistic point of view on this. Maybe LLMs will actually be able to eventually uh, discern between these truths for itself and actually weed out the disinformation and the bias that we already naturally have. But again, like that's such a tough nut to crack
yeah,
because again, just because I think it's biased doesn't mean someone else would agree with that it's biased
or the opposite.
or the opposite, right? Like, yeah. Um, I mean, I do think there's an interesting point. Like, we kind of skimmed over it a little bit, and I read about this a while ago. That different nation states are trying to like take hold of AI because they don't want their point of view to be subsumed in the what is currently somewhat, like, just being blunt, like fairly America centric point of view that LLMs are being trained from.
That's been the case
Uh,
since the internet came about, though.
I mean, go to China, like they have their own version of the internet basically that's monitored for their point of view, basically to reinforce what their nation state believes, right? Which I mean, again, like I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the point of view. And if you think about it even more philosophically, if you ask, I mean, just trying to think of a trivial example that's not too offensive, 40% of Indian population is vegetarian, let's say. If you go asking questions about eating meat to an LLM, it's probably going to be pretty positive about eating meat. Is that something that might be offensive? And again, I'm really abstracting things out to
Yeah, yeah.
make this example, right? Is that something that people who don't believe in eating meat might be like, hey, I don't want that perpetuated. I would rather see our country maintain the level of vegetarianism or whatever the belief is that we're talking about. And then right and wrong becomes very subjective.
What you're really talking about really is context and nuance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we kind of expect that context to be injected by the user, but if it's already in the LLM, if it's already baked into the core of what it says, even though you're providing your own context, do we get specific enough? Or you'd be like, yeah, I don't want to see this. Okay, I won't show you that anymore. But it's still core position is different than your core position, right?
Or yeah, or tone of voice or body language. I mean, there's so much that sets context around what you're talking about in the
Yeah,
conversations that you're having that does not translate to these at all. I
yeah,
mean, it's I can say you can deliver the word right 3 or 4 different ways, and they carry different contexts with them. Like, okay, yeah, you're right,
yeah.
right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
I yeah, it's there's context and nuance and tone, and body language that get missed, and that's always been my inherent issue with texting. Is you can't detect somebody's tone of voice from a text, um, you
Yeah.
know, but I don't know how we build that into these models, or help them reconnect that, or even if we should.
I mean, the should is an interesting question. So let me throw out another sort of historical question here, which is, uh, to an extent, the invention of TV and movies standardized accents and language. Now, I think one of the things that happened is we kind of have a standard version of English, that is, again, sort of America centric, right? Like it's sort of what people speak on TV, if you will, right? I'm not saying it's the correct or the whatever accent, simply sort of a standard one that, like, hey, if you're on TV and expected to be in a broad audience, this is the accent you're going to have. It sounds like a bland accent.
Yeah.
Um, does LLM sort of drive, especially if they don't, if we don't give them any sort of context, like you're not going to speak with a Southern accent, or you're not going to speak with a Canadian accent, or does LLM sort of having a core understanding create a bit of an evolution like that? Or do we simply immediately branch off and be like, oh, it's going to sound like me. I want it to sound like me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's sorry. You brought that up, and my brain went down a rabbit hole.
As it does.
You know, my wife and daughters watch a show on Netflix, Sweet Magnolias,
Okay.
and it's set in this supposedly like small coastal South Carolina town. And having grown up around that,
Yeah.
I know what people from that area sound like, and they do not all sound like they're from the Midwest.
Right.
A lot of people, you can't even understand what the hell they're saying.
Yeah.
And the one actor they have that tries an accent is one of the guys from American Pie. He was the lacrosse player.
Okay.
It is the worst attempt at a Southern accent I have ever heard in my life. It's like not even like parody comical. It is just awful.
Awful.
It
Oh.
is just like, I don't think I could ever, see somebody embarrass like small town South Carolina, but they do a great job of it.
This was like Kevin Costner in Robin Hood bad, like that bad.
Yeah, it's like you gotta have Carrie always come behind him and go, at least I can speak with an English accent.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like, it's an interesting thing. Like, is there going to be is AI going to adjust to the way we think, or might it actually start to create a different set of opinions in people, or a different set of expectations in people, because we're all going to the same sources for information and listening to the same voices, and like Alexa's voice, has that, I mean, it's a kind of a silly example because there's several different versions, but we've got Alexa, we've got other tools that speak to us. Are they in some way standardizing language, even because of the way that they sound or the words that they choose?
True.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also, when you talk about even just like regionalizing it and voices and how things are said, I
Yeah.
mean, there's slang and colloquialisms that even from different parts of the country that people don't get. I mean, it's like was it when I was in Germany, I was talking to a company and said, well, how married are you to the idea of such and such? And
Right.
they had, what are you talking about? Oh,
Hold on.
but I mean, but even if you say you're gonna make me lose my religion, nobody knows what nobody outside the South probably knows what that means, other than, are you quoting an REM song? I mean,
Right.
it means you're making me so mad I'm going to lose my religion and get angry.
Yeah. I mean, would some of those sort of colloquialisms and localisms start to get subsumed a little bit, because of the standardization, or like I think it's just an interesting question. I don't know if anyone's dealing with this. Is anyone out there building like a Southern accent version of the speech for LLMs. And even
The
if they
Foxworthy
did,
LLM.
the Foxworthy, you may be a redneck.
Well, no, I think about, he has like those like the redneck words,
Right.
and
Yeah.
thinking like all those get ingested,
Yes.
become part of it.
I wonder, like, is someone out there creating a redneck version of the LLMs? Like, okay, like this will be popular because there's an audience that just wants to talk, hear things talking to them a certain way.
Got Larry
Um,
the LLM.
yeah, Larry the. I don't know, dude. I think it's at least an interesting rabbit hole because I don't. There's an opportunity there. I think.
Hmm.
Like if anyone's listening and thinking like, geez, like everyone's done everything. Like I don't think everyone's done everything. I think we're all still thinking in a fairly standard way at the core of this. And then the question becomes, um, we started again predicated on trust. Do you trust people that sound more like you? I think there's a pretty good chance you do.
Yeah.
Or they're British and you trust them more because they're British. They have a British accent, which apparently is a thing too. but I mean, do you trust? Like, do you when you hear somebody who doesn't sound like you or doesn't use the same terminology or slang you do? Are you acting differently toward it? Is there an opportunity to make it more like an individual?
I think it makes it more relatable,
Yeah, at least,
and that
right?
leads towards that empathy and that human connection.
Yeah, which is a funny way to put it, like that human connection with the machine, right?
Yeah.
But that's
Well, I mean,
exactly what it is.
simulated human connection.
Simulated human connection, exactly, right? And that's what they're trying to create.
I'm trying to find a copy of the book that inspired the Matrix. It was
Yeah,
a French philosophy book, but I haven't found an English translation, and I don't really want to learn French at the moment. But all of this, it feels like it's cliche, but it feels like we're heading towards where the simulation is more real than real.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people that would embrace that right now, like the
Oh
whole
yeah,
kind of philosophy that we're in a all in a simulation anyway. The more the more the technology becomes real, the more that starts to feel a little real as well. I think, like the more it feels like everything's a little unreal because just all of the information's at your fingertips, all of the possibilities. You can make reality look like what you want it to look like.
okay, so I'll make this argument.
Okay,
Instagram is a simulation
Instagram is a simulation.
because
Okay,
people only put uh, the happiest, most positive versions of themselves out there. You get oh, I
yeah,
was on this cruise, or I was went on this great vacation, or I had this did this, my kids did this thing, and you don't see somebody put, I had a really shitty day. I mean, it was it is all a simulation and fake. And you've even got people like that try to you put up pictures like they're on a private plane, and there's like mocked up interiors of private planes you can rent for pictures like that. I
yeah.
mean, it is you know Instagram itself you could argue inherently is a simulation.
I'll say like when my wife and I actually got to take a trip to Iceland, and there's a couple famous hot springs in Iceland, and I didn't think much about it honestly. I hadn't seen much of this when I was traveling, but Instagram folks, whatever influencers, were all over these hot springs. So we're like watching this lady purely for scientific purposes. I'm watching her walk into the pool, like walk
Hmm.
into the pool 14 times, like over and over again, trying to get like the perfect shot while her husband or whoever is sitting there filming her, like trying to get that perfect version of reality to post out there to broadcast like what her perfect vacation is like. Meanwhile, her perfect vacation is walking into the same damn pool and getting out because it's freaking cold, getting
Yeah,
out of the warm pool and back into it 14 times and probably making herself a lot less happy than she would have been if she just got in the damn pool.
yeah.
So, yeah, like the whole simulation thing, man. I mean, I don't disagree like that people are creating that version of reality that is unreal at least. And maybe that's part of this whole thing is creating versions of unreality that are unreal. And untrustworthy for that
Yeah.
matter, right? Like I don't trust that person. Like they didn't really get in the pool in like that first shot. So
Well, Well, speaking of processing what's real and not real, I actually have to run for my therapy appointment. So,
All right, dude. We're at the hour anyway. So,
yep,
hey, dude, as always, it's been great talking to you. We'll be
pleasure.
back soon with more of whatever we called the show in the first place,
Yeah,
artificially
yeah,
independently
something.
intelligent.
Just two of
Something.
us yapping.